Where are you? Are you in the Bay Area right now?
No, I am in Victoria, British Columbia, kind of near
Oh, okay.
Seattle. Yeah.
Nice. Very exciting. All right. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go through the material, the full system, or at least half of the system that I run clients through to help them really shift how they motivate themselves and therefore overcome many of the issues that they're coming to me for: procrastination, burnout, this total sense of meaninglessness, or the sense that their accomplishments mean nothing. Those are often the people that I work with come to me for this reason. And this system really looks to the deep reasons that they're feeling that and tries to give them a new way to relate to the world. And therefore, a new way to relate to their motivation, where these issues no longer make sense. So, as I just mentioned, there's basically three types of people who I would tend to work with in this work. This is just patterns that I tend to notice about how I use this and when I use this. The first one would be procrastinators. Often these people might have been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. They feel stuck in unproductive patterns and they've tried a lot of things, right? They've tried all the to-do lists and apps and accountability buddies. For some reason, it just doesn't seem to be working. The second one that I tend to work with a lot is people who are burnt out. Often they were in a high paying job, a software engineer or something, and they've been on 18th month of sabbatical, and people are starting to wonder what's going on. And then less extreme versions, people, it's just still extreme, but it's less extreme. A client, for instance, who would work like a dog 5 days a week in the Bay Area and then would commute back to his home and just be in bed for 2 days a week. And so there are gradients to this idea of burnout that we see in our clients. And then finally, the last category is this category of dissatisfied high achievers. So I had a client who, for instance, was in a foreign country, bought and sold his company in US dollars. He had an amazing wife that he loved, external success. Everybody thought that he was so successful, but he just felt awful. He felt like there's something missing. I don't know what's happening. And that's the third category of people who I tend to find really benefit from the work we're going to go over today. And the first one is this idea of sacredness deficit disorder, which is that I often talk about this when people say they have attention deficit disorder. And I say, really? Do you never pay attention to anything? You don't play video games for hours? You don't get caught up on some random obsession and spend 3 days Googling and looking at things? And I say, no, I guess I do have attention. The issue, of course, with attention deficit disorder is actually regulating that attention. Only when it finds something very important or interesting will you attend to something. And the reason that people can't motivate themselves on their largest life things, finding partners, finding a career, things like that, is that they've lost touch with the sacred. They've lost touch with something beyond themselves. And this is a default state in society. There's this existential anemia, this absence of this deeper meaning, this deeper connection. And we fill that with what we're told will give us meaning. We try and do the job that we're supposed to do and do the career, or we do the self-care that we're told we're supposed to do. And it's like this idea of Keiko, eating dirt to get trace amounts of silver or magnesium, whatever the metal is. And in this case, sacredness is the metal that we're missing. We do these things to give these tiny trace amounts of it. But what this work is doing is really trying to reconnect people to the real thing. What we find is that in the absence of the sacred, that people fall into these unskillful methods of motivating themselves. So I like to split up the way people motivate themselves into these two categories that Nietzsche talks about. The first one is the Apollonian, named after the god Apollo, the god of reason, of order, of clarity. This sort of drive is the thing that makes you really want to break everything into parts and steps and have willpower and be a hero. That's the Apollonian drive. Then we have this Dionysian drive. Dionysus is the god of wine, of ecstasy, of joy. And this Dionysian mode, is the mode of flow, of integration, of this wholeness that does not break things into parts, that is not about knowing, but is about being. It's not about knowledge, it's about a state of being. And what I find is that most people that I work with, they're here in the grind. They think this is what they should do, and they're either therefore doing it, or they're doing this lotus eating over here and feeling guilty trying to get over to here. So they're either in this unskillful Dionysian mode where instead of giving themselves to higher forces, they're giving themselves to their basest desires, the desire to eat junk food and watch TV. But they really think they should be grinding, or they are grinding, right? They're giving themselves over to following the path that society has laid out for them, using willpower and forcing and trying to understand things and use steps and techniques. And so my work is about how to take people from here, the grind, over to joyful flow over here. Now, it's not that I think that there's no skillful Apollonian drives. That's why I have this slide. I want to mention that there are skillful ways to use willpower. When I work with clients for a while, we start bringing those in. But what I find is that if we try to go from the grind to courageous devotion, it's a really hard thing because everything gets reinterpreted through the lens of the grind. But when I take people over to joyful flow, there's no way to misinterpret, and nothing makes sense from the lens of the Apollonian when I'm talking about these Dionysian things like sacred, faith, and surrender, and the things that we're doing over here in joyful flow. As I said, people get stuck in the grind. This weaponized motivation system that society has used us and teaches us in every way, through the way we're told to parent, through the education system, through the advertisements. All of it is meant to make this bait and switch where we're told that if we do what is good for society, if we follow this path, that will be good for us. What society wants is what we want. And it's simply not true. So the main tool used here is this externally based shame and guilt. It takes these sacred emotions of shame and guilt that connect us to when we've done something wrong, or when we've hurt ourselves, when we've hurt someone else, and it uses it to say, no, you should feel shamed and guilty when you don't do what you're supposed to. I'm going to skip this for the sake of time, but there are various patterns that we tend to get caught into. One of them is that this shame and guilt, the way that it's used, it erodes self-trust. We use shame and guilt to motivate ourselves. We say, no, I'm a bad person. We motivate it to be a better person. But at the same time, we've eroded self-trust. We reinforce the fact that we're a bad person. Over time, as this happens, we don't want to do what's good for ourselves. Why would you want to help somebody that's a bad person? Why would you want to help somebody that you don't respect? And so over time, we erode our self-trust in the grind. So again, what I teach is this, what I call joyful flow, joyful motivation. It's this way of motivating yourself that taps into your innate wisdom, that respects all of your desires and feelings, including what we tend to think of as resistance, procrastination, etc. And that takes as a place of worship this sense of the sacred, these higher forces, this sense that there's something beyond ourselves, and that the tools, the processes we're going over is an offering through this sense of beyond ourselves, in faith, So that if we do this, then we can find this joyful flow and motivation. So there's a set of common objections I run into when I start telling people about this sense of joyful flow. The first one is, oh, you're just telling me to do what I want. That's going to make me be lazy. And my response is, why are you worried about it? Is it because you don't want to be lazy? And if you care about not being lazy, if you care about your long-term goals, this is a way of being that integrates that. If you have some worry, if you have some resistance to the way you're doing Dionysian motivation, to the way you're doing joyful flow, that means you're not fully doing Dionysian motivation, joyful flow, because that worry hasn't been integrated. Then there's this similar worry that, no, I'm just going to not do necessary things. I'm not going to do my taxes. That's not actually something I want to do. It's just something I have to do. And again, so my response to that is, oh, so you really want to get audited or thrown in jail? Okay, no, I don't want that. Then that's a desire you have. That's something to be integrated. Finally, and then the thing that comes up from that is, oh, so you want me to pretend to enjoy taxes? You want to pretend to want to do taxes so that even though I know I don't, so you're making me fool myself in order to motivate myself. No, that's not what it is. It's coming from acceptance. So part of you doesn't like that part, doesn't like doing taxes. That part has to be accepted. Part of you doesn't like getting audited or going to jail. That has to be accepted. Through that acceptance of everything, then you can come up with a holistic way of what's the best thing to do moving forward. So it's not forcing yourself to enjoy things. It's stopping this fight against reality. The reality is there's parts of taxes I don't enjoy. And the reality is that I wouldn't enjoy going. Okay, so you're saying that what you want me to do is just go with the flow, do the easy thing. For instance, I don't like running a marathon. So you're saying I should never run a marathon. And the answer is no. If you want to run a marathon, you can run a marathon, but you shouldn't be fighting against the hill and fighting against yourself at the same time. If you can say this hurts and fully embrace that, instead of saying, no, I don't want to be hurting, I don't want to be hurting, I don't want to be hurting, you put all your energy into fighting against the challenges of the world, the resistance of the world, instead of putting your energy into fighting against the resistance of yourself. And finally, there's this worry that, oh, if I just fall into my wants and desires, then I'm going to be immoral. I'm going to fall into my sexual desires and my addictions and all these things. But that's not what we find in Dionysian motivation. What you find is that when you go deep, deep, even into your desire for sex, your desire for other addictions, whatever it is, right within that, you find this connection to higher forces, this desire for the sacred, this deeply moral thing. And when you find that, you naturally, when you connect to that, when you go through the surface level desires to the deeper things, you naturally start to give. You naturally start to be more. You naturally start to follow your values in a way that is deeply resonant, connected, and integrous. I'll briefly go over this, and then I want to give a chance for questions soon. I know I've been talking for a little bit here. So this started a little over a decade ago, 15, 16 years ago. When I dropped out of college, I was trying so hard. I was smart, but I just couldn't get myself to go to classes. I couldn't get myself to do homework. I was pretty much acing tests, but my grades were awful because I didn't know how to motivate. The more that I tried to use this grinding approach, the worse it happened. I ended up just stuck in my dorm room, surfing the internet. And I was trying so hard to make it work. And so after that happened, I spent a long time trying everything. I tried therapists, I tried to-do lists, I tried reading books, I tried paying money, I tried accountability buddies, I tried apps, I tried all these different things. And until I came up with the system I'm going to share today, it was just, it would work for a week or two and then I would fall back down. It would work for a week or two and then I would fall back down. And so once I really got to a point where this was no longer my life was no longer held back by this sense of procrastination and burnout, I started to share it and teach it with others. And I've been doing that for the past 5 years or so and have since refined the method through that. So there's basically 4 steps that I teach. I'm going to go over the first 2 today because going over all 4, I just decided was too crazy in an hour and a half. But the first step, it is what's called learning tools. What I want to do with my clients is they come in, they say, I get overwhelmed. And I say, good news. I have a tool for you. It's 4 steps. And if you follow these 4 steps every time you get overwhelmed, you will no longer be overwhelmed. This is something that they can work on, that they can apply immediately and see immediate results to know what works. Further than that, each of these tools, which I'll go over when I go over the tools, teaches them how to go beyond the tool itself to something greater, something bigger, what Phil Stutz calls higher forces. And I borrow that term from him. It's these states of flow that don't feel like you are doing something. It feels like the universe is acting through you. And through these tools, we immediately solve their problems and then later show them that there's something beyond this problem solving approach. So the tools both solve their problems and take them beyond the place where they are trying to solve their problem. And so they have these tools that they know, okay, if I use this, then my problem will go away. And what we find is that they know they have the tool. They know they could use it in this moment, and they don't. For some reason, they don't use it. And this is normally where they give up on this. They say, I've tried so many tools. I have tools. I know they work, but for some reason, I'm not using them. And when I first start working with clients, one of the things that they get excited about is I say, no, that's part of the process. If you don't use the tools exactly as planned, exactly as expected, you're right on schedule. That means you have resistance. You have resistance to using the tools, and that's a good thing. That's exactly what we want in this system. So what we'll do is I'm going to give you this tool this week, and you may use it a little bit. You may not use it at all, and that's exactly what we want. When we come back, that's going to allow us to find the ways these tools are not right for you, the way these tools are not right for your situation, and we're going to be able to integrate that resistance in a way that allows you to use them at an even more powerful level. Then they've integrated resistance. They've worked through, they're using the tools, but there's still this sort of unnaturalness to it. Sometimes they forget to use the tools. They have to have reminders. There's a sense that, I don't know if this is really me LARPing as a person who is productive. And that's because their identity hasn't quite shifted yet. So in stage 3, we understand the structure of their identity. And there's a series of tools I teach to shift that identity to shift who they are, their sense of self to a new place. And so they've learned tools, they've integrated resistance, they've forged an identity. And now the question is, what do I do with that? There's this sense that, okay, I've started to see some shifts, but I haven't had the huge life change that you told me about when we started this process. And so the 4th step is what's called express yourself. You take all the changes, these connection to higher forces, these new identities, this resistance you've integrated, and you ask, how can I paint this across the canvas of my life? And so this is a series of techniques and tools and processes that teaches them and systematically shows how in every area of their life, this new way of being can be expressed. And again, there's a contradictory nature to this work in that I'm teaching this sense of going beyond tools and techniques and rigid breaking things down. And yet at every step, I'm using tools and techniques and rigidly breaking things down. And that's because I'm working with these people who are in this Apollonian, unskillful approach and bringing them to this Dionysian, skillful approach, going from the grind the joyful flow. And so each of these tools and processes is designed as training wheels for these people in the grind that they eventually take off and move into a more fluid approach through this process. So I think I can stop there. This is a good stopping point, about a half hour in. That just goes over, I think that goes over some of the basics of this method. We'll get into the specifics in the next hour. But before we do, I would love questions, comments, discussion, just a few minutes of how this is landing for people, questions people have, etc.
I really like the way that the resistance is built into it as a good thing. It's very nice that's not only anticipated but framed in such a helpful way, as it's definitely always a part of the journey.
Yeah.
Cool.
And again, when I talk about this with clients, this is often when I see them relax. Finally, somebody who gets me, finally somebody who understands what's going to happen when I try this stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have something?
When you're talking with clients about a higher power, like something bigger than yourself, do you have a specific kind of spiritual or religious framework in mind? Do you adapt that to where your client's coming from, or what's that stance?
Yeah, so I tend to use Phil Stutz's framework. He's a psychologist. I think he's here in LA, actually. And he talks about these higher forces as these sort of emotional states you get into that is the universe working through. And so he has a list of these higher forces. For instance, self-expression is one of the higher forces. Infinite love is one of the higher forces. And these are states you can get into, these flow states that it's really this sense of, oh, I've tuned into some frequency that's something bigger than myself. And I sometimes will just leave it at that with clients. And sometimes I'll talk about, depending on what I'm seeing, I'll say, I'll get into Ian McGilchrist's work. I'll talk about the left and right hemisphere. And I'll say that if you want to get into this right hemispheric mode, this fluid mode, there's the people who do that have this belief in the higher power, the higher force. Now you can know if you're uncomfortable with thinking of that as an actual higher force, you can know that this is just simply a way to frame it for your left hemisphere or your right hemisphere, and you can hold that onto that as long as that still makes sense to hold on to. But I'm going to talk about it in this way because that's the way that you're right. Yeah.
I was hoping you could say more today about forging an identity and how to do it more skillfully as opposed to in a limiting way sometimes as it can get.
I can briefly go into that. I haven't prepared anything for that. I only prepared for the first two, but I can cover some of the material I have on that if people would find it useful. Yeah, does that help? Other things that coming out for people, questions, comments, concerns before we go into this first step, the learn tools stage.
Was that feel something that
Phil Stutz, Stutz. There's a great documentary about him on Netflix called Stutz. And there's also, he has a series of great books. I recommend The Tools as the first book you would read if you're interested in finding out more about him. And I should say that he teaches, I would consider him teaching courageous devotion, more of the skillful Apollonian approach, rather than the skillful Dionysian approach. So it's a great sort of complement to this work in that way.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna go and open up this next presentation, the Learn Tools presentation. Again. So this is typically the stuff I would get into. I teach tools throughout. I'm constantly introducing tools, but when I first work with somebody, this is what I'm trying to get into in the first or second session to give somebody something immediately that they can have a sense of a quick win. These tools were developed over a long time through me learning something called cognitive task analysis and various traditions of that. So I learned the traditional cognitive task analysis approach, which comes from business management, I learned various what's called modeling approaches from neurolinguistic programming. I learned called thinking at the edge, which is a framework from Jenlin's focusing tradition. And these are all ways to take tacit knowledge, to take something that's indescribable, ineffable, and learn how to explain it, how to create a set of steps that other people can replicate. And I did a lot of interviews to get this from people. I did a lot of reading books and trying to extract the past knowledge that way. And I did a lot of experimenting with myself and with clients to develop the tools that we now have. There are 5 core tools that I teach. There's probably, I don't know, a dozen tools that I can bring in, but these are the 5 core ones that I find give people a step-by-step framework to go all the way from figuring out what they want to do to motivating themselves, to actually doing the action in this joyful flow way of being. And so it starts with just getting into love, getting into wholeness, getting into loving all of yourself. And that is done using something called the Evelyn technique. The Evelyn technique is a way to, I typically frame it as a way to deal with your inner critic. When you notice you're criticizing yourself, you can turn that critic into an ally by using this step-by-step technique. Once you're in this wholeness, this welcoming all of yourself, then the question is, okay, what do I actually want? And typically, again, this is framed in the context of the way I first start teaching this is in the context of some single task that you want to do. You're criticizing yourself about a single task. What do you want from this single task? But ultimately, these can be used on a much higher level, on a much broader level for your life as a whole. But I typically teach this in the context of a single task, so they have a tool they can use immediately to solve the problem directly. So the Oreo technique is about then, okay, I now am loving all of myself. What do I really want from this? Am I pressuring myself? Is this something related to from society? Or I connected to the deep underlying desire that I want? The Oreo technique tells you how to get it. Once you've connected to your desire, what I found in this work, one of the surprising things I found is that desire is different from results. Everybody says, no, you just have to want it enough, but that's not actually the case. To go from I want to I will, which are different phenomenological experiences. They're different inside. So the MAP technique is a way to teach yourself to turn desire into resolve. Once that resolves, you then need to take action. You say, I will do it, but how do I do it? So the boiling water technique helps you get from I will to what? Here's exactly what I'm going to do next. So then you're doing your task, you're working on it, and sometimes you get distracted. If you handle those distractions in the wrong way, it guarantees that you're going to be distracted later on. And the call waiting technique is a way to skillfully continue to work on the task or switch tasks skillfully when needed in a way that relaxes and changes your relationship to distractions over time so they happen less and less often. And this can be used for both internal and external distractions, but I typically teach this with internal distractions. I want to go on Facebook, or I suddenly am checking my email, or things like that. So this is the core tools I teach. And you notice their names are, each of them has this metaphor that I give, this little story that I give that explains the technique. And I found that once I started doing that, clients could really grasp onto and remember each of these techniques. So each of these techniques both teaches them how to do it and is taught in a way that helps them actually remember what it is and why it is. So how do I teach them? One of the main tools I use is what I call 5-minute work session, which is, we'll probably do it with one of you guys later, which is I say, okay, so what's something that brings up your inner critic right now that you could work on in the next 5 minutes? They'll tell me and I say, okay, let's practice that. I'm going to take you through the evidence. Okay, you're criticizing yourself. What is the positive intention there? Can you have gratitude and love for that? Okay, you're criticizing yourself for this. What is the positive intention behind behind the thing you're criticizing yourself? Can you love that? Can you have gratitude for that? Okay, can you have love and gratitude for all of yourself? Now, in that loving gratitude, can you start your 5-minute work session? Notice what that feels like. And you're actually practicing the exact thing of the trigger of the inner critic, the action of the Evelyn technique, and then the result of working on their task. And then I say, okay, 5 minutes is up. Let's find the next task. And you just go through this and they start to get this habit of using the technique. I do the same thing with visualization. What are times in the past you didn't do this? What would it have been like to notice that you were in the inner critic and use the Evelyn technique in that way? What are times in the future when you want to work on something? What's something you want to work on tomorrow? Visualize what that's going to be like using the Evelyn technique. I also recommend people overlearning. So I say the start of every work session this week, whether or not you're really feeling the inner critic, you're going to try to use the Evelyn and just see what happens. And in that way, you're going to find ways the Evelyn technique works that you didn't really think it would work. You're going to find the limits of where it works and where it doesn't. And you're going to get a sense of, oh, I can really use this in many situations that I didn't know. And then finally, I don't recommend people use these rigidly. I'm constantly adapting the tools. Someone says, I can't do self-love. Okay, can you do acceptance instead? Someone says, someone's very visual. I say, okay, why don't we turn this into a visual technique instead of a technique that uses words? And so we're constantly adopting and adapting the techniques to the person and the individuals, which allows them mastery because it suddenly clicks and fits. A big portion of what I do is also teaching people the phenomenology of their triggers. What is overwhelm actually like for you? What is pressure actually like for you? So that they're ready to apply them. Then this is another thing that if I prime clients for this, they're like, oh, such a weight off my shoulders, which is that it's expected that you're going to notice times when you could have used the technique and you didn't. And that means you're right on schedule. There's a progression to these things. First, you're going to notice after the fact that you could have used the technique. That's great. That means you're on schedule, you're on track. It means that your body mind is starting to recognize places where this technique could be used. And once you start to do it after the fact, and you should celebrate that rather than saying, oh man, I can't believe I didn't use the technique. You say, oh yes, I noticed that I didn't use the technique. Perfect. Then you can start noticing as the thing is happening. So I'm criticizing myself. I've been doing it for 10 minutes. I haven't started working. And I say, oh, I'm criticizing myself. I could use the Evelyn technique. You're going to say, oh, I've been criticizing myself for 10 minutes. Why haven't I used the Evelyn technique? You say, I noticed that I'm criticizing myself for 10 minutes. Now I can use the Evelyn technique. Then you start noticing even earlier. You say, there's criticism. I'm noticing the phenomenology of the inner critic coming up. Now I can use the Evelyn technique. Before I even get started on this criticism, I notice it's about to arise or it's arising in this moment, and immediately I can begin applying the technique. Later, I just find myself at a task and I'm saying, oh, I love myself. Where did that come from? Start applying it to other people. I'm about to criticize someone else, and suddenly I'm thinking about how much I love them. It's like, where is that happening right now? It's just automatic. My body mind has recognized that this is something powerful. This connects me to the deep forces, that this is working for me, that this is meeting my needs, and I'm just doing it automatically. So I've talked about this a little bit. Through the continued application of these techniques, there's a connection to what is called these higher forces, these deeper states of flow. And I prime clients for that so that when it happens to them, there's a falling into it. There's an allowing of it versus sometimes you don't know what's happening. There's what it's sort of jumping back when you start to get into these deeper states of flow. As I'm doing this, there's basically 3 things I'm trying to build with clients. There's 3 capacities and self-concepts that I am trying to build in them. The first one is self-trust. Oftentimes, these clients, through the grinds, have learned that they're supposed to make big promises to themselves or others in order to get themselves to do things, and then they don't do them. And there's been this eroding of trust over time in themselves. So one of the first things I say when I work with them is stop making promises. Just stop for now. Don't make commitments. Don't make promises to yourself. It's not going to help. And then we gradually, as they begin to use these tools, they see that they work. The fifth tool actually has promises as part of the technique. You make a promise, and then you make good on the promise later. And then so they've gone through all the tools, and at the very end, they start bringing in a little bit of promises. And then through that, I talk about how they can begin to make some more of those promises if those are drawn out of. So rather than making promises to make yourself do something, there's this depth of commitment to the sacred, to what you care about. And the only way you can express that is through a promise to yourself or someone else. And then you keep that. You do everything you can to keep that. It's impossible not to. And that builds this incredible self-trust later on. The second one is intentionality. I define intentionality as doing what they want, when they want, in the way they want, in connection with their deep wisdom. Once again, there's been this sense of a loss of agency with people, a sense of being buffeted around. And each of these tools gradually build that back up. And when I'm in sessions, I'm constantly reinforcing, oh, wow, remember a week ago, you wouldn't have been able to do that. You wouldn't have been able to make the decision to get up and shower. Maybe the client today, right? You wouldn't have been able to make the decision to get up and shower. Now you did. And then finally, the last capacity is faith. And I view this as almost a balance of the other two. There's self-trust, but can you go beyond this? There's intentionality, but can you go beyond intention? And so there's this ability to go beyond that. And the way I define faith is it's the opposite of how many people think of it. Many people think of it as, oh, I need to believe in something even though I haven't experienced it. And I say, no, that's not faith. Faith has nothing to do with that. Faith is experiencing something so completely that you go beyond any of your beliefs and ideas about it. And if you can do that completely, that's when you have access to these higher forces. If you can experience this desire you get from the Oreo technique so completely that you stop knowing what you're desiring or why you're desiring or who is desiring, that's when you get to the higher force of authentic desire through that total faith in the experience that tool is bringing. I'm just going to skip over this, but very briefly, again, people start using tools to solve their problems. And then over time, know the tool is an offering to the higher force. The tool is something given faith to the higher force with faith that through, again, just the total experience of that, I can go beyond my ideas of it. Suddenly, the tools start to feel like an extension of yourself. You use them in these different ways. You're using various parts of them. They start to get automatic in a way where the tool is a conduit to the higher. And then there's a flip. This has all been you. And suddenly, the barriers between you and the higher forces dissolve as you really get comfortable with this work. And you have days or weeks or months or years where you're not using the tools, you simply are the higher force, and you find the tools being expressed in that. So that's the high-end overview. What I'll do in a moment is I'll have one of you as a client. I'll show you one of the tools and how I teach it, and we'll walk through it to get a sense of what this actually looks like. But again, before we get there, comments, concerns, discussion, anything that's coming up from this.
Just that this is like very relevant to all of my journey over the past like 10 plus years also. Similar with the way too much self-coercion around all of this topic and all the repercussions of that, and finding ways that work and a kind of belief that has to be at the core of it in the end, and trust and faith and whatever. And I really like how it still has tools in a sense, because I feel like, yes, and from a certain perspective, they are unnecessary, but that makes it so much less graspable to someone who's like right there and wanting something to be able to hold on to something. Feels very resonant.
Was there anything particular that I'm curious?
Just my brain making this like pattern thing around. Oh, so maybe the life thing is like the first one, the learning the tools. It feels like a slightly like left hemisphere coded and skillful Apollonian, and then the next one is skillful Dionysian. Next one, it feels like the oscillation of learning to move from one hemisphere to the other, which is part of the skill of what we're
I never thought of that.
learn here.
Man, I'm going to be thinking about that for the next week. I know. Thanks for pointing that out.
And also like how it feels like there are tools, and the whole viewpoint is able to incorporate the oscillations. So I really like that.
Anything else that anybody wants to mention, bring up, talk about, discuss? So would anybody like to volunteer to be the client for this next section?
I'm always good to volunteer, although I feel like I've already been way too active.
It's very helpful to me that you're active. Please don't feel
all right.
upset about that. All right. Let's go ahead. Close this guy, full screen.
Do you end up using some slides with clients, or just explaining in words?
I typically don't use slides with clients. Occasionally, I'll bring up an image. I have some images and stuff to explain something. It's a good question, but I typically don't use these. But this will be good. What I'll do is I'll have these slides in the background as I'm working with you, so other people can see what I'm covering and why I'm covering it as we do it. So this is typically going to come up when I notice a client is really feeling a lot of pressure. The way that they're talking uses a lot of shoulds and have tos. And you can imagine we've been talking, and as we have been, I've noticed this pattern within you, Aggie. And so I'm going to start telling you the stories. Then that you just love Oreos. You're just obsessed with Oreos, but not the Oreos themselves. What you really love is the cream filling inside. You just love the Oreo cream. It connects you to higher forces. It gives you everything you want. It reaches all your goals. There's this deep desire for Oreo cream. And so you've read all the productivity books, and you know that if you want Oreo cookies, you got to make a goal around that. So you make a goal to eat more Oreo cookies. And then what you find is that in order to get to the cream filling, you've got to eat these chocolate cookies. So you say, all right, I'm gonna set a goal to get better at eating chocolate cookies. And so you start eating chocolate cookies once a day for 10 minutes so that you can really practice what you need to do. And then what you notice is that, in order to get these chocolate cookies, I need to open wrappers. I need to open a lot of wrappers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my wall a vision board of the wrappers I want to open. I'm going to put this in my GTD to-do list to open more wrappers. And what you find is that suddenly you're not enjoying this as much as you used to. You're not connected to that deep thing that started you with this. And you almost think about this, and you have this backing up. You have this annoying it. It's become this thing that you should do. I should open wrappers. It's something that you have to do. I've been told to open wrappers. I just got to do it. Instead of this deep connection to something you really care about. And the reason with that is that you got disconnected from the original thing you cared about, the cream filling inside. You got focused on the cookies. You got focused on the wrapping. You forgot about the cream filling. And so the Oreo technique is a technique to reconnect you with the cream filling. There are two internal senses that really disconnect you from the cream filling. The first one is called a should. A should often has to do with this sense of obligation or moral pressure. It's very related to the grind, the sense that, no, I've been told I should do this. I've been told this is the right thing to do. But it can often be internalized. No, I really should do this. It really is something I want. But you're coming from this place of pushing, of coercing instead of reconnecting to the autonomy of what you really want. And so what I want you to do, Aggie, is I just want you to say, I should out loud and see what completes that sentence. Okay. So you're going to do 3 or 4 of those. So say, I should, and see what arises without thinking about the answer. Just see what comes from your system when you say the words I should.
I should make sure I have enough space in my life to get to the stuff I want to do.
I should make sure I have enough space in my life to get something I want to do. Okay. The next one is something I should do today is.
Something I should do today is finish choosing what to bring to Porto.
Okay. So notice the feeling around choosing what to bring to Porto today, around making more space in your life to do what you want to do. There's this pushing, there's this sense of externalness, there's a sense of making yourself. That's the trigger we're talking about when we talk about a should. Now, the other one is a have to. A have to is often very different for people. There's this sense of not being able to consider other options. There's this sense of cutting off. There's this sense of, nope, this is here. This is all there is. So again,
I have to figure out how to get stuff. There's a new computer I have, and I have to figure out how to install, like have it be set up.
I have to figure out how to set up. Great. Something I have to do today is?
Something I have to do today is remember to not get too overwhelmed about the setup task that is going to be coming up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I have to set up my computer, and I have to remember not to get too overwhelmed. It's interesting that you have these coercion around non-coercion techniques in both of these. It's very common. And again, notice the feeling around these have to's. There's also this sense of pressure and pushing, but it may be a slightly different feel to it than the should. So what I want you to do, let's take the preparing for Porto as the example. Okay, so just notice that trigger, that sense of shouldness around preparing for Porto. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I want you to do is you're going to do this sentence completion, just like you completed I should. You're going to do this completion. I should prepare for Porto because I want.
I should prepare for Porto because I want to have what I need available.
I want to have what I need. Okay, great. So now, as you connect to that sense of wanting to have what you need available, does it still feel that sense, a little bit of a sense of that pressure and pushing, or is this easy sense of being pulled naturally towards that sense of wanting to have what you need?
I feel like some pull as opposed to no pull at all.
But there's still a little push. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So if there's a little push, then we notice, okay, there's still a little bit of shouldness there. So we make that clear in our language. We don't want to get shoulds and wants confused. So then we just do it again. I should have the stuff what I want available, the stuff that I want to use available because I want, and see what arises.
Mm-hmm. I should have the stuff that I'm going to need available because I want to not have to just be able to spend time with people.
Yeah. Now, again, feeling into this sense of just being able to spend time with people. Is there still this sense of pushing, or does it feel connected mostly or almost all sense of just pulling and eating?
Mostly the pulling and just this extra noticing of, and I want to be able to be cool there, like how I come off when I'm there.
Okay, yeah. So let's use one more level. It's like one more will make this shift. Okay. Again, if you notice it should, we're gonna reflect that in the language. You don't want to say I want because you want to reinforce, oh, there's still some shoulding in this.
Yeah.
I should just be able to connect with these people because I want.
I should just be able to connect with people there because I want. Yeah, I want friendships. That one feels clean.
This sense of Great. That one feels clean. Perfect.
Yeah.
And so now that we've gotten to the cream filling, the question is, what do we do? So what we want to do is we want to connect the cream filling back to the original task. So as you feel the cream filling, feel the connection, that friendship, and you think about preparing for Porto, you're going to see, how does this cream filling inform the task I'm doing? There are three ways. One is it can just make me want to do the task, and so I'll do the task. Right? And so you can just say, okay, there's just this genuine desire now, and I'm going to do it from this place of genuine desire. Two is it can make me change the task. Oh, I noticed, first of all, that I wasn't preparing in a way that would be good for friendship. I was not thinking about, okay, what would actually make these connections good. And I may want to actually bring, another way I can change it, I may actually want to bring this desire into the way I do the task. Maybe I can have a friend come over and pack with, right? And so that's the second way you can change it. It's the second way that it can inform the task. You can change it. And then the third way you can inform the task is release it and say, oh, actually preparing for Porto is a horrible way to have this friendship. I shouldn't be, there's much better ways to connect with friendship, and I'm not going to do this. So as you connect to this sense of friendship and you think about the original task, do you want to do it? Do you want to change it, or do you want to release it?
I definitely don't want to release it. And the change is more just, there could be some value in thinking about what I want to bring and how, and with that, while being connected to the friendship and what the wanting of friendship.
So if we were working together, I would now close this. I would say, go ahead, spend the next 2 minutes, think about that, stay connected to your desire. And what I would say is, what you're going to do is about 80% of your focus is going to be on doing the task, and 20% of your focus is going to be on noticing what it's like to do this from this place of change, right? And then you would do it, and we would discuss how it went and what it was.
And by doing, you mean 2 minutes of thinking about it and feeling what it's like, or actually going over there and
Actually
doing some of the actual task?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually going over. Yeah.
Nice.
And so that's what this might be something I go through in, say, the first session or the second session with the client. We would go through exactly the conversation I just had with you and do that. And then I would talk about when we come back. So the first thing I want you to notice is this sense of intentionality. You connected to what you want. And then from this place of what you want, you did what you and you went deep enough that this was wise. You didn't stop at, oh, I want to impress my friends, and then act from that place. You got to the deep desire. I might talk about self-trust. How long have you been trying to do this? Notice that through the use of this technique, you were able to decide you're going to do something and do it. And then I might talk a little bit about faith. As you were doing this, did you notice this sense of being pulled along? And then this next time, I really want you to focus on falling into that and not trying to think about it, but just allow yourself to fall into that to really get that up. So this is an example of how I might teach tools. Yeah. Questions, comments, things coming out for people.
Fun.
Yeah. What, sorry, anything? Sorry, anything coming up?
That was very interesting. I feel like filtering out the clean desire, as you said. So I feel like I want to explore that more in my own experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Could you actually say a bit more about a few examples about how that process actually works?
Which process actually works?
Going from connecting to what you actually want.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the next thing. I will talk about why this works. I'll go into intuitions and how they're structured in order to talk about resistance. So I will go more there. Is that what you really were wanting? Okay, why did this process get you there, or what do you mean by talk more about how it works?
What about the mechanics of it? I feel like in ways how you actually discern what is like a near truth versus what actually is there. Is it like just connecting with what feels?
Yeah. So there are different techniques I have that do this sort of finding the deep desire, and they actually stop at different places. And so this stops as soon as the sense of pressure is gone, the shouldness or the happiness is gone. We stop there. When I'm doing integrate resistance, I do something called core transformation. And that goes much deeper. That goes all the way until you connect to the higher, and only when you connect to the higher force, then you stop. And then when I'm in Buddhist, when I'm doing Buddhist meditation, I say go beyond the higher. Even that is not the final thing. What's beyond even that? And so there, depending on how I'm doing it and the purpose of it, you stop a different place. For this technique, you're just trying to get to the point when there's no longer that pressure. The way I tend to describe that is being pushed towards versus pulled towards. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, for sure.
Larry, did you have something?
Well, that makes sense because this resonates structurally with a lot of the stuff from core transformation, first parts of that, and some of the other. There's a nice piece from Marshall Rosenberg in the NBC book that's talking about translating have to choose to, and which also involves the option to say, wait a minute, there's no cream in this Oreo. I don't want this at all. I will take the L from whatever consequences of I'm not going to do this thing that I hate that's not rewarding anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's revelatory both for people that there actually is a cream filling in all of it. There's a desire for cream filling in all of these things, and the cream filling might not actually be there. You might have just gotten confused about the cream filling. So both of those aspects of this technique, I think, are revelatory. So I'll briefly, should I go over this? We've only got 15 minutes left, right? So, don't know. I'll just go into this and we'll get as much as we can done. Or we can stop here and just chat a bit. We can go deeper. You guys can ask questions. So what do you guys think? I could begin to introduce what the integrate resistance techniques I have are, how to do this emotional transformation and the way I think about that, the way I teach that. Or we could just shoot the shit for the last 15 minutes and if there's interest, I can do some of these later steps another time.
I'm interested in going on. And some of my question around that is going to be, like you mentioned in the beginning, around, resistance in using the tools is a good thing. And I'm guessing you're like getting to that right now. And my extra question is going to be like, how does it tie in with when there's like homework between sessions maybe? And it's, I did not at all feel like doing that. And like the reincorporation of that's just right. And then what we work with kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll answer that first while I pull this up. I very clearly say to clients, I do not give homework. I give suggestions. You're an adult. You can take them or not. If you find yourself not taking them, that's great. There's resistance we can find and we can integrate. If you find yourself taking them, that's great. There's experience of being the new self that we can use to integrate into your new identity. I often talk about with clients the difference between an accountability buddy, which is a Dionysian approach, that you're held to account for doing what you said you would do, versus a desire partner, which is a term I use for the Dionysian version of it. The desire partner is helping you connect to your deepest desires. And if you're not doing something, it's figuring out, okay, what desire do you have that's not in alignment? That would be the resistance. And so the desire partner is all about using things like the Oreo technique and the other techniques we teach to reconnect you to what you really want. And if you didn't do what you thought you wanted, what did you want instead? So those are some framings I use around this idea of homework. Yeah, go ahead.
I just said cool, thanks.
So integrating resistance. Resistance is the part of ourselves that pushes back against the changes we're trying to make. And I often tell people that resistance is one of their greatest inner resources for many reasons. One is it's going to point to the ways the tools may not align with. That may be because you're misinterpreted a certain aspect of the tool, and the resistance is saying, no, hold on. It's not about imagining what the cream filling is that you want and then trying to find that within it. You actually have to discover what the cream filling is, right? But alternatively, I may be teaching the tools wrong for you. The tools may not actually work for you. You have experiences that I don't have. You may know how to do this better than I do, especially for yourself. And so that's another way that the resistance really helps. It helps tailor the tools to your unique experiences. It can also show you actions that you don't want to do. I worked with this guy, guitarist, for a while. He's a friend of mine, and he had a great tweet about wanting something is done is different from wanting to do it. And so even if you go through all of the tools, there can still be this resistance that, okay, I do want this, but I haven't acknowledged to myself that there's some aspect of this that I don't like, that I don't want. And through integrating that, again, there's this no longer fighting reality. Okay, there's something I don't like about this, something I don't want, and I'm going to do it anyway. But through that integration, maybe I'll do it in a different way. Maybe I won't spend time on it, et cetera, et cetera. The thing with resistance, as people mostly experience it, is that it can be fixed and rigid to a particular way of seeing. It can become this barrier where you have no, do it, don't do it, and you're at a gridlock. So the goal with this step in the process is to integrate that resistance. Rather than these two pieces fighting against each other, you want to bring them so they're moving in the same direction. You want to untangle these patterns, these beliefs, these ways of seeing, get all of the wisdom, and get rid of all of the what's called aversion, fighting against, or clinging, holding on. And through just the total integration, the welcoming of this resistance, we find even more power, even more desire, even more motivation. Because all of this trapped power is fighting against you. It's not just getting out of the way, it's actually moving with you in the direction you're going. I'll skip over this due to time, but whenever I'm doing this work with clients, I let them know that there are risks. There are real risks to doing this work. I tell them exactly what the risks are, these three risks: the risk of re-traumatization, the risk of totally upending their entire life when they realize it's not integrity to live how they are, the risk that in the days and weeks following this work, you may be a bit more sensitive. And I ask them to take 100% responsibility for any outcomes that may happen as they do this work. So it's just worthwhile to say that if I'm going to teach this, you should know that there are risks. And I think you should let clients know that there are risks when you're going deep into emotion. I categorize resistance in 4 ways. There's resistance to using the tools. There's resistance to specific tasks, even once you've used the tools. There's excessive clinging and rigidity around the tools. That's also a type of resistance. And there's excessive clinging and rigidity around doing specific tasks. I also categorize that as a type of resistance. Let's see what time is it. Yeah, I'll go over this. So this is a sequence that I do with clients to get them to understand what resistance is and what their intuitions are, often in groups. So if I'm teaching like a workshop and there's a large group and I need to make sure we're all on the same page, we all understand what felt senses are and how they interact and how they work in our system, then I'll go through this sequence. With an individual client, I typically won't. I'll assume they know certain things. I'll implicitly imply many of these things. And then only if that's not working, if they're confused, if that's too much for them, will I go back and maybe take them through this sequence if they really need it. So the first thing, the first part of the sequence is just letting people know, no, intuition is real. This bodily felt sense might not be bodily. It's not bodily for everyone, bodily for most people, but this felt sense is real. So often I will show them an image like this little wine glass that's tipping off a table, and say, imagine you're there. You're in that room. You see that happening. What happens in your body and mind as you do that? Oh, there's some felt sense that says, no, this is bad. No, this is wrong. No, I don't like this. And that is pointing at something real. It's bad because it knows what's going to happen. It has a prediction about what's going to happen in a few moments after this picture was taken. So just showing, yes, you have intuitions, they're real, and they point to something real. Then I will talk about the next part of the sequence is you can deliberately activate these intuitions. So you guys can try this right now. There's different ways I do this. Sometimes we do something called inner sim, where you imagine a scenario and you imagine what will happen. But the way I typically do this is I just say, okay, what I want you to do out loud is try and say this emotion. I'm feeling happy. Go ahead and try and say it out loud. Feeling happy. And then you can say, I'm sad. You can say, I'm angry. You can say, I'm lonely. And I just want people to notice what happens in their body and their mind as they say them. In particular, there will be two things they were looking for. One is resonance. Yes, I do feel a part of me is feeling happy. And the other is dissonance. No, I'm not happy. I'm something else instead. And through that, you can start to see that you don't just have to wait for these intuitions to arise. You can deliberately do things to activate your intuition. So hopefully you guys have tried one of these, said something, you found some sort of resonance or dissonance in your body at this point. And the next step is to say you can actually understand the reasons, the intentions behind it. So the way I tend to teach this is through what's called relaxed mental inquiry. So find the part of you that resonated with happiness, and you're just gonna, while staying connected to that part of you, it may be an image, it may be a feeling, it may be a memory, while being connected to it, you're just gonna hold this question, meaning not think about the answer, just hold it and see what arises. And this is the type of way I would explain it to somebody who I think doesn't have much interest. Really explain to them what holding the question is. And I'll explain it a few different ways, and as I'm asking this to them, I'm really looking for, are they still connected to it? Are they using limbic language? Are they really checking inside, or have they got into their head and just trying to figure out the answer to constantly bring them back to this? And so the question you hold for this happiness is, what do you want for me? What do you want for Trinley or Aggie or Sarah? And just see what arises. And so when I do this, what do you want from me? Yeah, just get this. So I want you to experience joy in your life. And so there's this happiness to experiencing joy. There's this sense of higher intention or purpose. And you can also go lower. You can say, okay, how? You can say why, go up, or you can say how to get deeper. Okay, so how will you experience happiness? By sharing valuable things with people that can use it to improve the world or something. I don't know if that's exactly the limbic language, something like that. And so now I've started to create this plan. I'll start to map out this plan, this hierarchy that I will share things with people that matter, and through that happiness, and through that I'll be able to experience joy in my life. My intention is to have a hierarchy. And then I'll talk a little bit about internal conflict. Okay, so imagine that you're sharing things like this in your life for days or weeks or months or years. Do you have any sense of something's not quite right? And for me, when I do that, when I imagine doing that for a long time, I do have this sense like fear. People are scary or something that's in my throat. And this is when we start to talk about internal conflict. So I often use this graphic that I created many years ago. You read it right to left to give an example of how this might look inside. So somebody might have this felt sense that they want to clean their room. When they see a dirty room, they feel bad. When they see a clean room, they feel good. And that's because when they introspect what's important about a clean room, they have a sense that it'll create more focus. And more focus will lead to success. The more success will give me admiration. And admiration will lead to connection. Great. So they want the clean room. But then they also want a dirty room. They have an internal conflict. And they have a sense that if they have the dirty room, then that sort of makes them this mad genius, absent-minded character. And if they're that character, then that will justify their flaws. And if they can justify their flaws, that will make them lovable. And if they're lovable, then that will lead to connection. And so you have a person who wants both a clean room and a dirty room to get. And so this is an illustration, a simplified illustration of what people may find as they do this. Let's see, we've got 3 minutes left. So I want to keep going. No, let's just stop here. Actually, yeah, I'll go. I do want to get to the reconsolidation hierarchy, because I talk a little bit about the parts model, pretending that each of these things are little people in your system with their own wants and desires, ability to converse and connect with each other. I talked about how do you find resistance, there's different tools to do. Then I talked about it's possible to actually transform resistance using something called memory reconsolidation. It's a scientific process that happens in your brain where you reactivate the target memory or schema or feeling or sensation. Then you, while experiencing it, experience a sense of mismatch, experience a way that it's not true. And then through that, you learn, okay, what is the more nuanced view? What is the truth in this? And the way that I teach this is through the way that I make this happen is through what I call the reconsolidation hierarchy. This is a step-by-step process that solves the main problem in memory reconsolidation, which is that reactivation and mismatch are at odds. If you challenge a schema, it tends to want to retreat, to deactivate, to not be present. This is a huge problem in the way that many therapists run CBT, that by countering a belief, you often suppress the belief rather than having it activated while mismatch. So the way that you overcome that is through this reconsolidation hierarchy. You lay the groundwork that is going to allow this schema to stay activated. You make sure it's really strong and activated. You totally understand it, so it feels seen. You totally accept it, and then you gradually bring in these deeper and deeper forms of mystery, so you can start questioning it. Is that really true? Are there other ways to see this? You can start dialogue with it. You can see it this way, yeah, but you can also see it this way. So you can feel this way, yeah, but you can also feel that way. There's a back and forth, the switching that happens. And then you can directly challenge it. Okay, what does it feel like to both see it this way and not see it this way at the same time? And so gradually, as you're moving through this, at some point, you get this transformation, this reconsolidation moment. It could happen at activation. It could happen all the way when you get challenging, and then you move forward. So if you want to go through that process, there's 4 tools that I recommend. Unfortunately, I don't have a chance to show you what it looks like to do this sort of transformational work today. I'm sure many of you know it. But I recommend internal double crux. You can search that article on Less Wrong about a tool called internal double crux. The Let Go Belief process. This is a way to work with, by the way, beliefs. The Let Go Belief process is a way to work with memories and to go through the reconsolidation hierarchy with memories. Course transformation is a way to work with feelings, felt senses, and to go through the reconsolidation hierarchy that way. And then metaphors of movement is a way to work with symbols and imagery. Those are the 4 languages of these parts of these felt senses. And each of these are as good beginner tools to walk you through the reconsolidation hierarchy. So I will stop there. This is a lot of what I would say probably half of the work I do with clients is this sort of transformational work. Once we learn the tools, I often talk about the ability to really use the tools. The resistance is like a table. The table needs to tip over to really be able to use the tools. We need to integrate all of that resistance. And each integration is like taking a leg off the table. And the table might have 50 legs, and I might say, no, still really hard, take a table off. No, don't feel this change, take your table off. But then over time, the table starts to be a little wobbly. There starts to be this shift where people begin to connect with the higher forces and use the tools. And then ultimately it falls over. And that's when the shift comes to really total integration with these higher forces, really living your life with them living through you. I know if anybody needs to go, they can now because we're 2 minutes over. But I do want to give a chance to discuss this, talk about this, answer questions, talk about anything that came up now if anybody wants to stay.
What was it with the table? I think I missed the beginning. Like where, like the resistance is the legs or the resistance is
so the behavior, the new way of being, the new way of relating is the table. The resistance is the legs. So you have your current way of being, that's the grind. Then you have all these legs holding up this way of being. Each time you integrate resistance, it's like removing a leg. And the clients are like, I felt this huge shift. Seems like my behavior is very similar. I noticed myself reacting in certain new ways, but it hadn't really changed that much. And so I often give this metaphor of the table. I said, okay, we integrated one resistance. We took off one of the legs of the table of this old way of being, but there's still maybe 10 more legs. And I give them some examples. So I don't show this to clients, but I usually have a Kanban board of all of the tools that I'm teaching them that goes through the stages of change and all of the different types of limiting beliefs or resistances that haven't been integrated. And so I'll say, yeah, we did. And now that that leg is gone. The table may be a little wobbler, but there's this. There's still the way you relate your fear of being left. There's still a few other things. And what you'll find is that as we work on that, eventually the table will wobble. And so there's this recognition there's just some work to do in this stage. There's a lot of resistance to integrate before we can fully move over from the grind to joyful. And there's the sharing of that in this.
Cool.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks. Other questions, comments, things people are bringing up?
I have just one more from the beginning. You mentioned, I just wanted to reflect that I really liked how when you said that, the resistance coming up means that you're right on schedule, and that it means that you're already noticing opportunities when to do it. I really liked how granular that kind of celebration of a win is, because very often it would be like, I very instantly turning it into a should when you start noticing the opportunity to practice this new way of being, and to then just let them know that the noticing itself is another stage that is so good that it's happening. I really liked adding that to my worldview. Thanks.
Yeah, it's these sorts of reframings of getting people to be kind to themselves, I find it really does shift how when they show up at the session. They really just change it. And you do this with resistance as well. Let me think of some examples recently. So I had a client come and was like, we were looking into this resistance. It just says be better. That's great. Isn't it great you have a part of you that wants you to be better? That's amazing. And this sort of reframing into recognizing the power and recognizing the positives of resistance, recognizing the growth that happens before the ultimate thing you think you should be doing. Again, I find is key for at least the work I do. I just said another quick thing about the legs of a table. I have a client that I've been working with for, I don't know, a couple of years now. And he had this thing around the belief that he was stupid, which is tied to many deeper things. And we'd go through a reconsolidation and he would say, oh yeah, this is much deeper and kinder. It still thinks I'm stupid, but it's much more open to these other things. And just the past few sessions, I've had the sense, okay, I think this is ready now to get the stupid thing. And so last time we got rid of I shouldn't say got rid of, but we really did a deep integration on one of the 3 or 4 parts that holds this sense of stupidity. And instead, it's now holding the sense of playfulness and openness to experience. And I've been telling him this whole time, it's just going to take a while. There's a lot of stuff we have to get through. There's even some work we have to do around, what's it called? Attachment styles before we can get this. And we're now just ready to do that. And he's now feeling the table start to work. Yeah. Anything else? Otherwise, we can wrap up. But I want to give Mohit and Sarah any chance if they have any questions, things you want to discuss.
I think just thanks for sharing that.
No problem. Thanks for being here, friends.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, guys. So if there's interest in either going through and seeing an example of what this integrating resistance was like, or going into the further 2 parts of the method, the shifting your identity and expressing yourself aspects, let me know. I'm happy to do more of these, but only if there's interest. And if any of you, Sarah, I would love to, I know a lot of very interesting things, by the way, that you could share. I'd love to have you maybe do one of these at some point. Mohit, I don't know you as well, but if you think of anything that you'd like to present, I know that everybody who shows up usually has something really powerful to offer. So if you'd like to do that, please let me know. All right, friends, have a good one, and hopefully we'll see y'all in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thank